Whenever I think about our colonies, I think of them as a wayward lost brother because of how stunningly British they are. No other countries influence the colonies. They are very, very British. Do not look into it. How's it going? My name is Coach Thornberry. I am a high school history teacher in the U.S. state of Georgia. In the first few videos on the colonial era, we looked at mercantilism and transatlantic trade, and then we looked at the three geographic regions, the southern colonies, New England, and the middle colonies. This video will start Standard 2. We are using the Georgia Standards of Excellence, and these standards work with most state school curriculum. In the second standard, we will look more in depth at themes like cultural diversity, the Middle Passage, the Great Awakening, and solitary neglect. Now, the text for Standard 2. Standard 2 says, describe the early English colonial society and investigate the development of its governance. The substandard we're looking at for this video is, describe European cultural diversity, including the contributions of different ethnic and religious groups. The southern, middle, and New England colonies developed different societal characteristics during the colonial period. The southern colonies tended to attract young English men seeking financial gain. The New England colonies, with their religious foundations, tended to attract more English families for settlement. The middle colonies had a greater ethnic and religious diversity than the other regions during the early colonial period due to England's acquisition of previously settled territory from other European countries, specifically the Netherlands and Sweden. Women in the colonies and in Britain were primarily viewed as inferior to men and possessed few rights. Sadly, this was the trend for most of history until the modern era. England faced significant unemployment as well as political and religious turmoil prior to 1660. These factors prompted immigrants to leave England and travel to America for new opportunities. Let's take a step back and look at this on a timeline. The pink area is the 1600s, or the 17th century. The blue area is the 1700s, or the 18th century. The colonial period is from 1609, when Jamestown is founded, to 1776, when the Declaration of Independence is signed. The event that prompted all this change was the restoration of the crown, when Charles II was crowned king and England entered a more stable period. We've already referenced this period twice. Once when King James II's allies were given the new colony of Carolina, and also when his brother was given the colony of New York. Both these events happened after the restoration of the crown in the 1660s. Another big theme after the restoration of the crown is the immigration to the colonies begins to change, where large portions of the immigrants come from countries other than England. England was more stable after the restoration, and labor needs had to be met with new immigrants. After 1660, the influx of immigrants were from various European nations, such as Ireland, Scotland, and the various German kingdoms. Scottish immigrants had an easier access to the colonies after the union of Scotland and England in 1707. Most of the Scottish and Irish immigrants to America settled in Appalachia. The unique speech patterns and culture of the United States Appalachian region can be traced back to Scottish and Irish colonial immigrants who settled in the region prior to the American Revolution. Thanks for the accent, guys. German immigrants also began to populate England's American colonies. What is today Germany was divided into dozens of small kingdoms. To finance each kingdom's defense, it was pretty usual for these people to be taxed heavily and forced into military service. William Penn recruited these disgruntled Germans to immigrate to his new colony of Pennsylvania. The middle colonies belonged to other European nations before they were taken by England. The cultures represented in the middle colonies include Dutch, Swedish, German, Scottish, and French. One of the most well-known of these ethnic groups that lasted beyond the colonial period is the Pennsylvania Dutch, communities of German speakers in Pennsylvania that lived into the 1900s. Confusingly, the Pennsylvania Dutch were Germans. They were called Pennsylvania Dutch as a misunderstanding. Various ethnic groups and religious groups had to work together and tolerate each other. Elements of these various European cultures, from language, style, food, architecture, all came together eventually to create a uniquely American culture. Various religious groups immigrated to British North America seeking religious freedom. Puritans governed the New England colonies of Massachusetts Bay and Plymouth as a theocracy with religious rules. The Puritans did not tolerate other religions practicing within their own colonies. In fact, their intolerance is what created Connecticut and Rhode Island. Maryland was established as a Catholic colony, but later passed the Act of Toleration to protect Catholics who had become a religious minority. Rhode Island was accepting of all religions, including followers of Protestant sects, Catholicism, Quakerism, and even Judaism. That was very rare at the time for Protestant Christians to be tolerant of Jewish people. The Quakers settled primarily in Pennsylvania and were also very tolerant of other faiths. The American tradition of separation of church and state and religious diversity was started in the colonies. Despite what my evil British alter ego will tell you, the colonies were very diverse. It's important to highlight how the United States has been a very diverse place from the very beginning. In the Revolutionary War unit, we'll talk about how American victory was impossible without foreign intervention. Education was emphasized differently in the colonial regions. The New England colonies and the Mid-Atlantic colonies established schools within their towns. Most people lived in towns, making schools more feasible. New England churches also taught literacy in order to read the Bible. In the 1700s, New England might have been the most literate society in the entire world because of its Puritan emphasis on learning to read the Bible. The southern colonies had large-scale agriculture, which wasn't very conducive for cities. Without cities, schools weren't as feasible. Most people who were educated in the South were the children of wealthy planters who had private tutors. Schools were more rare in the South, but in the big scheme of the world, the 13 colonies had higher literacy rates than most of the world.
Colonial diversity. Never any respect. Never shown any respect.
All right, in the next one, we're going to talk about the Middle Passage. It's a pretty difficult subject, but we're going to have to tackle it. It's a very important topic. As far as what was just covered, the big takeaway is the big melting pot that America is known for has been here from the very beginning.